Thanks for checking out SYMFONI on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and like our videos for updates.
My reaction is obvious. I think that, the citizens of this country are fast maturing, better than the leaders in the democratic process. Everything that that democracy represents is very different from the attitude of our rulers, because that's what they now make themselves out to be. In democracy, you don't have a king. In democracy, you don't have a feudal lord. You have someone who is in a position only by virtue of the legitimacy that citizens conferred on them, electoral process. And so to think that somebody who is elected into office in this country would just wake up and decide that citizens cannot have their voice and that dissent is something that they have to punish because they have the power. I hope they understand that there's no place in democracy for that. The constitutionally guaranteed right to voice, to opinion, to disagree without being disagreeable, to actually be one that demands for explanation, the right to know, the citizens' right to association. All of these things are well established within the rule of law that governs democracy. The president is not more equal than us citizens. It doesn't have any place in democracy. And so to wake up and hear, Twitter rights have been taken from Nigerians because the president got into a quarrel with Twitter for infringing on their standards and policies that they basically operate across the world. That's so totally embarrassing for the entire country. And I just hope that, wisdom will come and this government will know how not to push things to the ridiculous level that we've just seen.
The presidency is looking, or the latest explanation going beyond the disagreement between the president and Twitter to issues of national security and the role it accuses Twitter of playing in undermining Nigeria's corporate existence.
If you believed that, you'd believe anything. I mean, the federal government has been trying to get a handle on citizens' voice. It's constantly trying to shrink the public space. The public space is that sphere where citizens can have an opinion and interact with statecraft. And, we've noticed that a government that actually used social media to its benefit suddenly has such an antagonistic and adversarial relationship with social media. And that's because this federal government, just like the one before it, by the way, they just have intolerance for anyone who is not, doing the usual sycophantic, bowing down and worshiping the Lord and Manu, the Lord of the Manu. It shouldn't be. There's no place in democracy for this. The democratic ideals that we subscribe to by becoming a democracy must be respected by all. When they say issues of national security, my goodness, this was the lie that we once told ourselves across the continent, and held the telecom sector under such dominant control of the powers that be, and see what it cost the continent. But as soon as the continent liberalized access to telephony, to telecom services, just look at the improvement that has happened economically, socially, politically, in terms of the demand for good governance. And so any government that tells you that, because of national security, that's why the president decided to ban Twitter. They said indefinitely, and suddenly I hear it's temporarily. Then that person would need to be more analytical. The issue that we have seen, and we have seen how frequently the government wants to probate and approbate at the same time. They want to gain the benefits of, social media, and yet they want social media to go only in the way that they would like to see. You can't have that. Governance is a very tough business. And there are moments when your citizens are totally fed up with the serial failure to provide good governance. If you can't give them good governance, at least allow them their voice so that they can use that voice to express that their dissatisfaction, their disenchantment. And if they are doing it in the way that I see citizens do it on Twitter, it's fine. Look, I get insulted so much on Twitter by, trolls that have been hired by this government. They do it as a matter of their daily living. And for me, I simply have said that I am going to drive the development of the demand side for good governance. I don't do social media because I have so much time on my hand. If you know my program, you would know that I don't have that kind of time that is wasted. I deliberately have been on social media, especially Twitter, because I believe that until we develop the demand side of governance, that is citizens who are empowered, who are engaged, who are putting the necessary pressure on government, what you're going to have is the current monopolistic democracy that has basically destroyed the growth and maturation of governance on not just our country, but across the continent.
Have you been using Twitter since the announcement of the ban?
Oh, yes, I have been. And I've told Malami to come and arrest me. Let him come and arrest me and take me to court. Because, this is it's really sad how the government portrays itself to operate very, very mediocre IQ. The IQ, it's almost like the cumulative IQ of the administration just keeps declining every day that it tries to engage with citizens. How can an Attorney General of the Federation simply act knee-jerk and say that they would arrest anybody who is using Twitter? We're all virtual citizens now. I can access Twitter not as someone who is sitting in Nigeria. And even if I access Twitter as one sitting in Nigeria, there is absolutely no law that forbids me from doing that. The word of the presidency does not amount to a law. And even if it were a law, it would be an unjust law. And it is entirely legal to disobey an unjust law.
Okay, now, we shared earlier the concern of the international community, notable countries, US, EU, Ireland, Canada, United Kingdom, leading countries expressing concern over this development in Nigeria. What do you think is the wider international implications for Nigeria?
Everyone is sort of embarrassed on our behalf because they are wondering, did Nigerian government think this through? How do you engage a platform like Twitter as though you were operating at the same equivalency? We're a sovereign country, and we ought to conduct ourselves with that level of restraint and dignity. All that they needed to do was to slow down and to reflect. Somebody needed to introspect before reacting to Twitter. Because, how did this get generated? It was generated by virtue of the fact that the president made a speech that he ought to be really contrite about at this time. But our president has shown incorrigibility when it comes to matters of building a society, managing the diversity of this country. President Buhari thinks that, he's some savior that everybody needs to bow and tremble for. No, we're not going to do that. We're citizens. You can't talk to a certain region of your country as though they were some serfs. No, we don't worship you. Sorry, you're president, you're elected. And so, you can't talk to the entire Southeast as though, there is this deep-seated animus. And then you go and recall that part of history for these people that's so painful. And you tell them that you would deal with them in the way that they already understand. What does that mean? A president of a country says such a sacrilegious thing, and then the whole international community calls his attention to the fact that this is not a statement that should be coming out of the mouth of a democratic leader. And then you get angry. Come on, that's not right. I think President Buhari should listen to the Ghanaians. They say, if no one advises you, advise yourself.
Okay, now, there are reports of over 2 billion naira daily loss as a result of the suspension of Twitter operations in Nigeria. Can you take us through this a little bit more?
So, you know, if you have followed my tweet, I think on Saturday, I did say that I would like to personally commission an economic study into the benefits of social media to our country. That's because I am careful to throw data around. I don't know what the data is, but anecdotally, you can see incredible opportunities that especially the young Nigerians have seized upon through being linked with the rest of the world and the closer links that they even have with themselves. What Twitter has done is to basically redefine. Social media has redefined the concept of market. Market used to be a physical location. And which in many ways narrowed the extent of the audience that your product or your service was speaking to. But today, with virtual systems of market and the social networks that exist, it means that anyone with an idea flourishes. And so we've seen young people, oh my goodness, I joined Twitter, I think in 2000 and, was it 2011? I'm 11 years old on Twitter. You know, so I joined Twitter in my own case because I couldn't accept to be sedentary and teach in particular universities that wanted me to teach for them at the time that I was heading back home to Nigeria. Because of the nature of work that I do, my work is quite continental. And so I was mourning the fact that, oh, I love teaching. But now I can't accept to do that, even in my post-retirement years. And my son said, Mom, but you know you can teach on social media. And I said, how? And he said, Mom, get yourself a Twitter account and just use a hashtag and call it hashtag whatever course you want to teach. Start tweeting on it. People will interact with you. And you would have that conversation as though you were in a classroom setting. That's how I joined Twitter 11 years ago. So it has multiple benefits: sharing of knowledge, services, products, new ideas, innovation, collaboration. And our children, the young people in this country, on our continent, are maximizing this. They are using this to innovate. And suddenly you say, because president is angry at Twitter, that he puts a ban on it. That is totally unacceptable. And nobody's taking that serious at all. This government needs to understand technology. I don't even think that anyone amongst them understood that saying that you're banning Twitter in Nigeria is equivalent to, what would I can't even find an analogy for it because it's ludicrous.
And the young people, many of their businesses, like you mentioned, are on Twitter, linked to Twitter, even broadcast stations, online newspapers, most of the access, most of the content they push out through Twitter. Enormous cost during this suspension, no doubt.
It's huge cost. Even the government doesn't understand that it is losing. There are so many of the businesses that are making more money by virtue of their virtual operations than they are making on the ground these days. And if it's a government that should be worried that its tax to GDP ratio is still less than 8%, it wouldn't be doing this kind of a thing. This is pettiness. How can you have pettiness as part of government policy? You know, so from the big companies and the banks, like banks and other such mega enterprises, to middle and medium scale enterprises, to the one individual business. I see it. I have watched some of the young people on Twitter. I knew them as, you know, young people. Some of them actually found themselves there. and got married. I have watched some of them, start a little idea that then flourished, and they've become really, influential people economically and socially. Twitter has been, the net benefit has been positive for the Nigerian people. Think of in our own case also. Beyond at the time that I first joined Twitter, until 2014, all I did with Twitter was, teach a class that I called hashtag Public Policy 101. So, and it was quite, it was something that a lot of the young ones were excited about and engaged me on it. And as a result of that Public Policy 101, I have signed many recommendation letters for young Nigerians, young Africans who have gone to public policy school, because public policy is definitely a field of knowledge that we need many more of our young people to know in order to get the very concise knowledge of how to run the public systems, right? But think of what even happened after later on in 2014. The fact that the Northeast situation came to global limelight only because of Twitter. A lot of the people who probably are joining President Buhari to hail his, saying that he has cancelled Twitter for Nigeria, were people who benefited by virtue of the fact that Twitter was a platform through which our cry for Chibok girls and what was going on in the Northeast came to public limelight. That war in the Northeast, what do you call it? The insurgency at that time, when it was still called an insurgency. Today, it's a tragic terrorism of the highest order. When it first started, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was quiet, and yet, it was going on. It was when Chibok girls were abducted, and we put it out there because BBC... Under a hashtag, BBC first announced the abduction of Chibok girls. And when I saw it, I was shocked. I was like, no, this cannot be. How can children of this number be taken from their school? I said to BBC, is this verified? Then suddenly I realized myself that I was talking to BBC. Well,
now,
thank you very much.
Your quick reaction to those concerns that Twitter has the potential, perhaps may have in the past, undermine national security of some countries, including Nigeria?
Well, let me put this way. They didn't have to take our president violating Twitter rules for the president to now have this, or the government to now have this matter of national security. You see, that's the problem. The tail is, in this case, wagging the dog, and that's not a good thing. So if indeed there are real cases of concern, it should have been something that we would have known, that our government has, engaged Twitter to talk about certain kinds of things that worries it. There are countries that have done that. And that's entirely a reasonable thing to do. But our president can't drag us to war with Twitter on the basis of his own wrongdoing. They are two different things. Any reasonable person would agree that the social media space is a space that has to be managed. You have to be very conscious, and we also have to hold them accountable, and that's what countries try to do. But you do it in a way that is dignifying of both your country and your people, and we haven't done that. What the world is reading today is that our president got into trouble with Twitter and decided to ban Twitter for all Nigerians. The president already knows that he has this tyrannical history, and then he worsens it. The Americans say, when you're in a hole, you stop digging, but it doesn't seem like something that our government cares about.
Okay, just a quick one. Some people felt maybe what the president would have done was to suspend his account or delete his account out of protest for that tweet that was deleted, but it wasn't the option that was considered.
That's what I meant by they probate and approbate at the same time. They want to have their cake and eat it. and that's not possible. That's incongruent.
Okay.
The president really should get out of Twitter if he doesn't like Twitter, and all the accounts should be deleted, and they should leave it so that citizens can have their own space to have their conversation. You're not giving good governance. The little that citizens have is to be able to vent how they feel about it, to be able to use it to demand for change. For example, one of the things that I have heard is that the government is still sitting with rage because the young people dared to ask for police reforms through the NSAS, which the government itself now spiraled into something else. Because we saw, if you remember, Mechi, the trend on NSAS was one where we knew exactly when something went wrong. And it went wrong by virtue of the way that the Nigerian police and the federal government tried to derail the advocacy, very civilized advocacy of the young people of this country. It was the government that hired thugs to go and beat up the young people who were protesting.
The government denied it, wasn't it?
They rode the tiger, and the government rode the tiger. That's what happened. These young people who are being blamed for things that happened they must not carry any blame for NSAS. They did the right thing to demand for police reforms. The government felt that they were losing control because the voice of those citizens were so strong, and people were really convinced that government needed to embark on those reforms. Rather than respond in a way that a decent government would do, it decided to use the usual muzzle of finding talks.
Okay, now the last question, the very last question on this issue before we move over to the other one. How will you rate the Buhari administration's tolerance of free speech, including the social media, in the last 6 years against the backdrop of this Twitter ban?
Maybe what you want to say is, how would I rate its intolerance? Because there's nothing called tolerance at all with this government. It has been absolutely intolerant. And President Buhari does not think he owes the citizens any accountability. And the citizens are saying to him, no, sir, you owe us accountability. So if I rate his intolerance, I would say is a 10 over 10 of intolerance.
Of free speech, expression of opinion and all that?
Yes, because think of it. How many times have we seen the government take on the media, whether it's the print media or the electronic media, and now social media? What annoys this government is that it cannot have the control over social media that it has had over your organizations. I see your organizations, you invite people to have conversation with you and you say, oh, we just want to state that everything that has been said here is not the opinion of AIT. What's that? You invited somebody to your program and then you're doing a caveat on the conversation. That's not. It's because you're afraid of what MBC will do to you. We've seen it with print media. We've seen it with the radio. The radio houses say that they are frequently paying fines for things that people who called into a program said. How can you have that? You can't narrow the democratic space in this way. I repeat it again. President Buhari is not a king of Nigeria. Nigerians are not subjects of President Buhari. We are citizens with bona fide rights that have been given to us by virtue of the Nigerian Constitution. And the office of the citizen is the highest office in the land. President Buhari occupies the highest political office. We give that to him by virtue of the Constitution and what it says about the president. But the highest office in the land is the office of the citizen. That's what gives legitimacy to the office of the president, the office of the Senate president, the office of the Speaker of the House. They wouldn't exist without the office of the citizen. And so we need to check this kind of excessive use of undemocratic principles and practices to destroy our democracy.
Okay, Fixed Politics Initiative was one of the many groups that presented memoranda at the public hearing organized by the National Assembly in the last 2 weeks. Is also one of the groups that is insisting that what we need is an entirely new constitution. What's the basis for that?
Well, the basis for that, and many people have canvassed the same, is that when you have a situation that is irreparable, when you have a chaotic situation occasioned by the structural deformities that you see in the practice of our federalism, in the practice of even basic governance, and you have tried over and over again, and you've done 4 amendments, and you want to do a 5th one. Just basic common sense would let you know that the situation is too grave for you to try to amend. And so the Constitution is a stumbling block to the emergence of Nigeria from country to nation. And even worse, with the Constitution and the practice of it, what we have seen is that we are fast losing even the definition of country according to the United Nations. So we have to be careful. This is a crisis-ridden country, and it's digging deeper and deeper into a situation that is not good for it. I think that we need to be sensible and use this as a moment of opportunity to have the kind of conversation that the Kenyans, for example, had when that situation I think it was 2008 or thereabout, when that country was going to just implode. And they had to catch themselves back from the precipice. And what they did was to start a constitutional process that brought everybody to a place of, okay, let's all keep calm. And let's really have a conversation and negotiate the kind of Kenya that's agreeable to all of us. And then we're going to all vote on the basis of a referendum around the things that matter to us. So the citizens worked together with their political leaders to define a pathway. So the participation was important because the participation matters for inclusion. And then process is important because process would determine legitimacy. And then substance is important because it will be a matter of the issues that matter most to all citizens on which they want to have a consensus. And so their process led them to what is today's constitution. It really averted. I was very much part of that process because Kofi Annan, as Secretary General of the UN, was doing because the UN is the political side of the international multilateral system, right? But the World Bank has the responsibility on the economics of some of those issues that happen in countries, because it's a whole political economy matter. So I was seeing and feeding into that process on the economic side of things. That really cooled things in Kenya because the leaders understood that was a moment of opportunity. It's so important to seize the moment to avert danger when you see that it is coming in a forceful way against your country, if you really care about your country. So my sense is that we are at a place where the 1999 Constitution has maxed out. In other words, it's given us the maximum possibilities that it can offer. If it were not so, we would not have the level of disenchantment and agitation. The truth is that I don't think that this Constitution is a Constitution that should follow us into the rest of the 21st century. We can't afford that. And so it's time to slow down as a country and let the tempers cool, because we're able to get ourselves into a big tent conversation. I believe that I don't know that there are too many Nigerians who, seeing a Nigeria that can work, would be interested in being a tiny country. I don't think there are many Nigerians like that.
Okay.
Nigerians are protesting injustice. The injustice is what is, really fueling this very very difficult hard languages that we're seeing, and we can avert that by doing a constitutional process. And the recommendation that we have, Amechi, if I may, is that instead of doing this bazaar of trying to amend things that are so hole-ridden, there are too many holes, and you can't try to patch it up. A sack that is so torn in all directions, you can no longer patch it. So instead of doing that, why don't you do a single issue amendment of the Constitution, basically having a clause on referendum and the way that referendum would work. And through that process, commence this national conversation that would then enable us to generate the agenda issues for a referendum by the citizens, and the agenda issues would be voted on by your citizens. And in that process, you would get the kind of agreement when that kind of
at the forum, the public hearing where you canvass this position for fixed politics, the Deputy Senate President Ovie Omagege also spoke, saying, based on the present constitution, the National Assembly is hamstrung on pushing for a new constitution, that it can only amend. Some organizations, such as the Afenifere, said they in fact opted out of the public hearing, saying it's amount to waste of time. There's no need to legitimize that process. Now, you have put two issues on the table: new constitution, infusion of referendum. Is there an option C now, as it were, in the absence of a new constitution? What's the option C for the amendment process in terms of getting some of the wishes that are contained in this envisaged new constitution into the present constitution?
You know, Amechi, when you have a structural problem, you cannot use the bandage, as Nigerians call it, to deal with it. A structural problem needs a structural solution. Where we are now, Nigeria is in a deep structural problem. You don't have an option C. What you have as your best option right now is to have a national conversation, a referendum, a new constitution that is based on the legitimacy of absolute inclusion of all citizens. And that, for me, means that when the National Assembly says, oh, you know, we're creations of the Constitution, it only has provision in Section 9 for its amendment, and it's very clear what you do. It doesn't have any clauses concerning its debt, basically, and so we can't offer any of that. Well, I think that what our leaders are doing is that they live in a cocoon. They are cocooned away, and therefore they think that all is well. All is not well with the country. You know, leadership is, being ahead of crisis. And right now, our leaders are not doing that. All is not well.
That's anticipating crisis and preventing it.
Anticipate and prevent. And they are not doing that. You can't live in your cocoon and think that, you would do a little bit of, here and there. It's not going to work, Amechi. We do need to let it be known that in this same country, in 2010, when we were faced with a precipitous decline or collapse because of the succession issue between an incapacitated President Yaradua and his vice president at that time, President Jonathan, we innovated. The pressure was so much. It was compelling argument for there to be a resolution. And the Constitution had a lacuna. What did we do? We innovated on the basis of the principles of the principle of doctrine of necessity. And we found a solution that helped the country to get back on its right path. We are in a situation even worse than that. We are in a situation where different parts of this country simply are saying we're not part of Nigeria. And that's because we don't think that we're part of Nigeria. It's a moment of reflection. It's a moment of real leadership. This is not a moment for acrimony. A real leader allows for them, they allow themselves to actually imagine vulnerability. But they know that vulnerability ends up being strength in situations like this. This is not the time you start reading riot acts to anybody who is saying that there is need for us to have a new constitution. There is need for us to talk about the structure of our country. If you listen to my presentation, I said that there are three socio-political things that should worry us, that argue for a new constitution. Number one, the management of our diversity is a problem right now, a deep problem. And it's showing up in all kinds of ways. I've never seen this level of enmity in our country. And number two, I said that the centering of the citizens in our democracy, that is so absolutely important as something that we must do. Our citizens must be centered in our democracy. Number three, I said that for us to transform from country to nation, that we need to have this kind of a process that legitimizes our agreement on how we would dwell together as one people. And then I said there are two major economic problems. These are the two. Every other issue that you can raise about Nigeria, you will find them under these two economic problems. One, low productivity of Nigeria. Our low productivity factor is part of what's hobbling us from taking advantage of all the endowments, whether they be human, technical, they be natural, or whatever else. And then two, our low competitiveness. We are not competitive. If you put us side by side, countries that we started the development journey with, like Malaysia, like Singapore, like South Korea or Brazil, for example, outside of the Commonwealth, we don't measure. So to solve these things, you need this new process. Our political leaders are in a cocoon, and that cocoon will burst. Without endanger the country. They should manage this whole process.
Well, the countries you mentioned were even better off than them in the 60s and early 70s, and they have left off behind. So what you're saying, in effect, to allow you to conclude in 30 seconds, is that this is the time not to be too legalistic. This is the time to become a statesman and to look at the wider picture, the future of the country. In 30 seconds, your conclusion.
Well, how can I add anything to that except to say I concur, Amechi.